Hurricane Helene has made landfall as an extremely dangerous Category 4 hurricane. Good evening, I'm Mike Nasa with this 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time update on this Category 4 storm, a Category 4 U.S. landfall right there in the Big Bend of Florida, very near what they call the Forgotten Coast, in much more wildlife preserve rural areas, but there are still towns and cities that are affected, and this weather is spreading very quickly into Georgia, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. Here is the latest from the National Hurricane Center on Hurricane Helene as of 11:20 p.m. Eastern Time. Hurricane Helene has made landfall. It made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane in the Florida Big Bend region at about 11:10 p.m. Eastern Time, just east of the mouth of the Osceola River, and this is about 10 miles west-southwest of Perry, Florida. Based on data from the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft, the maximum sustained winds were estimated to be 140 miles per hour. That's a Category 4, solid Category 4 hurricane, and the minimum central pressure 938 millibars. The hurricane, as of 11:10 p.m. Eastern Time, was at 30.0 north, 83.7 west. That puts it about 70 miles north-northwest of Cedar Key, or about 45 miles east-southeast of Tallahassee. And again, it's inland now over Florida. Winds still 140 miles per hour, 938 millibars. Moving, racing north-northeast at 24 miles per hour. That's from the forecasters at the National Hurricane Center. The aircraft flying out there, they've done a great job. I did want to note that earlier in one of my previous updates this evening, I mentioned that there was a NOAA WP-3 Orion aircraft that we thought was in trouble in the eye. They said during the second of 4 eyewall passes in Helene, they orbited within the eye to release a second uncrewed aircraft for research purposes, and they were also evaluating if landing conditions would allow a return to home base instead of the point of origin. Everything's okay. The aircraft, which is called Kermit, by the way, we have Kermit, Miss Piggy, and Gonzo. Kermit, we thought we lost you in the eye of Helene, but they are okay, and they've been doing a great job. Some historical facts are in order. Hurricane Helene making landfall is the strongest hurricane to make landfall in the Big Bend of Florida on record. Now, we only have records that go back to 1851, which is not that long ago in the span of nature, but as best as we could figure, the record was in 1896. There was a hurricane almost this strong, 125 miles per hour, and that hit the area there in the Big Bend, Cedar Key. But they haven't experienced a direct landfall like this since at least the election of William McKinley. So again, quite a nasty historic storm. There's the radar, and if I zoom in, Perry is pretty much in the eye, and this is as of 11:30, 11:35. So this whole region here is experiencing the eye of the hurricane, the eye wall now moving into Monticello and Madison, and getting very close there to Valdosta. So you guys in Valdosta, you've got very little time, so I want you, if you can still see this update as of 11:30, make sure that you're away from windows near an interior room, because the winds are going to go from about 40 miles an hour to 140 miles per hour very, very quickly as the eye wall pushes in. And we also have the onshore flow continuing with the storm surge. We've had water rises not just in these areas, which are probably underwater, Horseshoe Beach, Keaton Beach, Steinhatchee, but way down the coast in Tampa, even down to Clearwater. And as the winds switch directions, you're going to have that onshore flow continue. So if you haven't gotten a surge yet, you will. Now, the National Weather Service has issued extreme wind warnings going into the state of Georgia because the eye wall of the hurricane is producing those disastrous major hurricane winds. Extreme hurricane winds are imminent or happening now. If you are under these extreme wind warnings, take cover immediately in an interior portion of a well-built structure. Like I said, that's sustained winds of 115 miles an hour or greater. If the hurricane is sustained at about 140, you could have higher gusts. So this is very, very serious, to say nothing of the water. I'm looking at some tide gauges here, and if I look over here towards, let's see, Cedar Key, look at that. Look at the tide there at Cedar Key. This is where it normally is, off the charts into major flooding. And who knows how accurate this even is. We're probably likely to have even more water rises as time goes on. So that's just one example of the surge that's occurring. In fact, if I look at Clearwater, let's go way down to Clearwater. Look at that. Boom, way up there. Major flooding taking place. I've heard as high as 8 to 10 feet of surge in Clearwater, well away from the eye of Hurricane Helene. Making landfall as a Category 4 hurricane is more rare than you would think. I made a list of Category 4 and Category 5 landfalls in the United States going back about 40 years. And there have only been 8 Category 4 hurricanes that have crossed the coast at that intensity in America in the last 40 years. One of them, Hurricane Helene. And if you look at Category 5 hurricanes, only 2 of them, Andrew 92, Michael 2018. So again, when you're talking about 10 storms here, Helene is in pretty historic hurricane territory, and that's because of how violent this storm is. Another little interesting tidbit, if we scroll down and look at barometric pressure, Helene is at 938 millibars. Look at another hurricane that made landfall at 938 millibars. Right here in North Carolina, it was a strong Category 3 in 1958. Its name, Helene. There was another Hurricane Helene. In 1958, it didn't make landfall. It skimmed the coastline of North Carolina near Cape Fear within 10 miles on September 26th, 1958, with 938 millibar pressure. So here we are, 66 years later. On September 26th, another 938 millibar hurricane impact on the United States named Helene. Although this time, I don't think the name will stick around anymore. So again, if you are in that area of Perry, if you're in Valdosta, all the way up through Georgia, we'll be keeping track of this as the system moves in. It will weaken, but the winds are still going to be so strong that you're going to have prolonged outages. You're going to have a lot of problems. It's starting already. If I look at Florida, look how many people are out in that area. Tremendous power outages, and that's going to be for a prolonged area of time and a prolonged portion of time. And then look at it starting there in southern Georgia, and this is just going to spread right through the state. So again, outages, trees down, a very dangerous situation. Taking a look at the entire Atlantic, quite an impressive storm in the southeastern United States. Of course, we still have Tropical Storm John flooding Mexico. We have Isaac, which developed Wednesday night, could become a hurricane, stay out. Another system out here. And watch the Caribbean. I know we're dealing with a landfall right now, but there could be something else in a few days after Helene. But the tropics are very active with a disastrous Category 4 landfall in the Big Bend of Florida tonight. I'm Mike Nasel with continuing video update coverage of Category 4 Hurricane Helene. Stay tuned for more as the storm moves into Florida and Georgia.